That now makes the vacancy problem that we have now even worse, because you have landlords that might have that basement that they can rent out or that spare unit, right? But they're choosing not to because of the risk in the market when it comes to tenant delinquency.
Hello, and welcome to Sink or Swim, a weekly podcast brought to you by RentSync, where we take a deep dive into the PropTech, multifamily, and rental housing industry. In each episode, we uncover the technologies and strategies used to help overcome operational challenges and increase the value of your multifamily investments. So, let's get into our conversation today. Welcome back to Sink or Swim. I'm your host, Nicolina Savelli, and on this podcast, I take a tactical approach to helping those in multifamily reach more renters and maximize their rental income. And today, I have the founder and CEO of SingleKey with me, Lika, here to talk about the residential leasing process and how landlords and property managers can better manage the risks involved. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Nicolina. This is exciting.
Yeah, I'm so glad to have you here. I know it was last minute, but glad you made time for us today. And before we get into the conversation, I'd love for you to please share with our listeners a little bit about your professional background and really the origin story behind SingleKey, if you can.
Yeah, absolutely. I started my career as an actual engineer, and I did that for a few years. More recently, about 5-6 years ago, I did an MBA and transitioned to the finance side of things, and spent about 5 years in consumer credit risk, Capital One, TD Bank, really kind of dealing with lending, creditworthiness, and that's really where the idea for SingleKey came up. We were really exploring this space as an opportunity at the bank to figure out, hey, how do we kind of get involved in the rental industry, given that it's such a huge component. You're looking at somebody, you're looking at how much money tenants are spending on a monthly basis. The biggest part of their income will go, 30% of their income will go towards paying your rent. And currently it's done very informally, right? It's typically a check written to your landlord or an e-transfer out there. And unlike every other purchase you make in your life, there was no financing behind it, no insurance, nothing really that we could leverage. So as we explored this space, we figured that, hey, we'd have to provide some value to the landlord because they're the ones that really, control that relationship, they're the key stakeholder. And, after many, many interviews with landlords, we realized that, there's a lot of challenges when it comes to being a landlord and in the rental process in general. But what stood out to us, the number one pain point that everybody experienced was the one thing they couldn't control. And that was the tenant, right? Yeah. Everybody, they were worried about tenants that, would prove to be difficult to manage, that would cause headaches, tenants that wouldn't pay the rent, would damage their property, and, concerns about protecting their investment and making sure that they were getting a return on it and able to kind of cover the expenses. That was the number one concern. So that's how we basically came up with the idea for SingleKey and the rent guarantee program. And the entire mission of our company is really, how do we take the stress, the worry, the risk out of landlords when it comes to managing their rental property?
Absolutely. I mean, I am a very, very small time landlord, basically mortgage hacking with my basement, renting on my basement. And yeah. I've had friends, I've had my brother, and it's kind of surprising what people kind of, you think you can trust them. I can only imagine how much risk is involved with people who are managing more than one renter. It's a tremendous amount of stress, a tremendous amount of risk. So it's a very important point. And let's get kind of right into the conversation.
Absolutely.
Improving the tenant application process and helping landlords find the right tenants while mitigating the risks they take with every lease they sign. Now, I want to walk through the journey landlords usually take with your product, starting with tenant screening and background checks. How does your product differ from other tenant screening tools out there?
Right. And this is the first step. And, because you can actually reduce a lot of your risk up front by just making you do proper due diligence when it comes to selecting the right tenants to lease out your property to. It is a very important part of it. And, it's something that lenders are starting to take more seriously now. You go back 10 years ago, most people didn't even bother with credit checks. They would just kind of, make a judgment call or a gut call on the tenant after they met them. Now it's getting a bit more sophisticated, which is great. And we're proud to say that we have one of the most comprehensive tenant screening solutions out there in the market right now to provide the landlord with all the data that they need to make a good decision on that tenant. So if you're looking at our tenant credit and background check, it's not just a credit report. We run a full Equifax credit report. We include all the trade lines. all the deadline items, bankruptcies, and all the other financial items that determine the financial health. But we go beyond that. We also include criminal record searches, social media scans. In Ontario, we even run an eviction search, so we can tell if you've been evicted in the last 12 months.
Oh, wow.
You can, absolutely. So, it is a bit more tailored towards the rental case as opposed to just a general credit report.
Right.
Now, in addition, in terms of what else sets us apart, we've really focused on making this tool very easy to use. We do deal with some older clients, landlords typically are in that 35 to, 55 age range. Mm-hmm. So we want something that's super easy to use, 3 clicks and you're done. You're able to actually go online onto our website and get a report under 5 minutes, all self-serve without having to make a call to us. So that's been a big differentiator and part of our success. And then lastly, it's not just a report. We've actually added a lot of tech features to help you automate a lot of the common tasks that come along with renting. So for example, we've got a pre-screening tool that you can use. It's basically a questionnaire that you can customize and send a link to your tenants on, when they're interested in applying for your rental. So when you get those like 40 or 50 leads that want to come in for a viewing, you can ask a few questions in terms of, hey, how many people are moving in? When are you guys planning to move in? Do you have a job? Do you have any pets? Do you have, what's the car situation? So you can actually at least kind of make sure they're a good fit.
Right.
Before proceed with them. So that's kind of like the first step in terms of kind of just weeding out the applicants. After that, you hold your viewings, you have a couple of people in mind that you like, and then you proceed to run our tenant screening, our report. And now as part of the report, we also run auto reference checks. So we'll have an online rental application form that you invite your tenant to. They'll provide all their information, they'll give you the consent to run the credit check. They'll also put in their previous landlord's references, their employer's references. They can upload pay stubs, employment letters, etc. And as part of that form, as soon as we get the landlord's information, we'll send a quick reference email check to the previous landlord to ask about their experience with the tenant.
Okay. Yeah, that's important.
Exactly. And the last piece, now that when the report is ready, we have the property information, we have the tenant's information, we have the landlord's info. So we have most of the info we need to actually fill your lease agreement. So we have an export button where you can actually draft your Ontario standard lease agreement with all the information about the tenant, the property, and the landlord to help you kind of get started and finalize that lease.
Yeah, so that helps leasing agents just move that process along as quickly as possible after all this information has been already gathered, right? So, you've done all of this due diligence. You're trying to select the right tenant, but then things happen and people default on payments and you need to evict them after maybe a few months of having to deal with that. Or I'm not sure what the regulations are with how long you take or what landlords are doing right now. But I see you provide an eviction calculator on your website, which is extremely helpful. But I was kind of startled to see the fees associated with evictions.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about those fees and maybe explain why they differ between provinces and any advice you have for landlords that are looking to evict?
Yeah, absolutely. And our service is offered in all Canadian provinces now. Our reports are across Canada. Our rent guarantee is offered in every province with the exception of Quebec. So we've gathered a lot of knowledge and data in terms of kind of what the typical eviction process looks like in every province. And we had one of our, Danish, one of our legal team members, actually conduct an analysis and really kind of nail down, hey, what is a typical process? How long is a typical eviction process in every province? Mm-hmm. And then what are each of the steps that you need to take? What are the fees associated with that? And really kind of put together an analysis around that, which we found very helpful. So, typically when it comes to just legal fees, you're looking at typically paying for a paralegal if you don't want to do it yourself. And that's something we recommend. In addition to that, there will be court filing fees for the eviction. You'll also have to pay a sheriff to go out there and actually, get the tenant out. So on average, in most provinces, that ends up totaling up to about $1,500 when it's all said and done. Now, that's probably one of your smallest expenses when it comes to the eviction part, right? Mm-hmm. The biggest challenge is that in most provinces, it'll take about 3 to 4 months on average to get the tenant out, right? And that's kind of like business as usual, pre-COVID, there's no backlog.
Yeah.
It can differ a bit depending on what province you're in. So Ontario is famously one of the harder ones.
Of course.
Right? Whereas, some of in Alberta, for example, it is quite a bit easier to get tenants out. That eviction time is probably about half as lengthy.
Is it because of the supply available in these other provinces so they can find other accommodations faster? Is that the biggest concern?
I can't really comment on that. I think it's more of a policy issue in terms of how the regulations are set up around that.
Yeah.
I'm sure the rental market or, the housing market in general probably plays a factor in that as well. Mm-hmm. And then lastly, in addition to legal fees and lost rent, you're also looking at perhaps incurring some damages. Typically when you have a fallout with your tenant and they're not paying the rent, you're probably not on the best terms.
Yeah.
So it's not unusual to take it out on the property. So based on our analysis, we saw that about 1 in 6 eviction claims typically will include a damage claim as well, which is about $3,500 on average as well. So you tally all of that up, and now you're looking at about $10,000 or $15,000 of losses in general, for dealing with an eviction, maybe more depending on what the rent is on the property. So our recommendation is always, especially if you're a smaller landlord, you don't have the experience and the know-how, is definitely reach out to a paralegal in your province for advice to manage the delinquency. We rely on a network of partners and paralegals in each province that we work with to run our rent guarantee program. And we're happy to refer you to one of our specialists.
Perfect. Yeah. So this obviously leads me to this rent guarantee solution, which basically protects landlords and property managers when a tenant stops paying their rent. Now, what was the impetus for this product? What made you think of this? Obviously, you've kind of talked about your career and what has made you kind of focus on this, but what was really the highlight there for creating this product?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, we looked at this use case and we thought, hey, this is a perfect insurance use case, right? Where, something that doesn't happen very often, not every tenant out there is delinquent, obviously. There's a few bad apples here and there. But the problem is that if you're the unlucky landlord that came across that tenant and you're suffering through that, delinquency and eviction process, it's a big shock in terms of both financial and, stress, right? So you're going to incur, as we spoke before, you can incur about $10,000 or $15,000 of losses in terms of lost rent, damages, et cetera. But you have to figure out now how to go through that eviction process and hire a paralegal and really kind of understand that. So, we said, well, why don't we just basically offer a product where we basically provide a rent guarantee insurance, right? Where if you're the unlucky person that month that needs us, well, we'll be there for you to kind of guarantee the rent, cover damages to the property, take care of the legal, the eviction process for you and cover the legal fees there. So it's especially important, if you are a smaller guy, you're relying on that, like yourself, Nicole, you're relying on that rental income to cover your property expenses, cover the mortgage payments, and the average independent landlord out there only has about 2 or 3 properties on average. So they don't have a huge portfolio of properties to be able to spread their losses.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So when it happens to you, you are really put in a difficult position because now you have to cover 2 or 3 mortgages. That puts you in a really kind of difficult position. On top of that, it's also a very stressful experience to just go through the eviction process, because you don't have the staff in place. You don't have the property manager, the superintendent.
Absolutely.
To deal with all these. So it all falls on you.
And even if you do, you're still digging into your bottom line. There's still an issue with the bottom line, even if you have, 1,000 doors. So it's something you want to avoid and want to mitigate any risks that you can in taking on, because it's just, I do bring this up a little bit later, but the cost of rent is going up. And that is just going to be an issue, whether or not it's a bad renter or a good renter. It's not even a question of that. It's just the economy and where we're headed and whether or not people are going to have the financial means to make their rent payments on time. So there's also that.
Are you looking to connect with more renters in Quebec and fill units fast? When you syndicate your properties with RentSync, you'll have free access to some of the most popular rental listing sites in the province, including louer.ca and Logis Quebec. Plus, we've upgraded our autoresponder tool so you can instantly translate your emails in French to better engage with all your prospects. If you're currently a RentSync client, your account manager can help you get set up. Or, if you're looking for more information, visit rentsync.com/Quebec-rental-listings. Now let's get back to the show.
And let's talk a bit about that because that's important as well, right? Like we're looking at the macroeconomic environment. I mean, COVID was a huge shock to every industry, but especially this one. You're talking about like the rental market. It was a perfect storm, right? You had people fleeing, the cities. You had vacancies going up. You had rent prices going down. You had a bit of a kind of a readjustment in the economy as well, as a lot of people got furloughed and had to figure out kind of what to do. And you had eviction bans in a lot of jurisdictions, right? Where, it wasn't unusual to go 6 months without being able to actually apply for an eviction order. So we saw a lot of landlords go 6 to 12 months without getting a rent payment. And in a very difficult position. We've had calls from landlords that were forced to sell their property because they couldn't carry the debt or service the mortgage payments. And that's not easy either, right? Because nobody wants to buy a property where there's a delinquent tenant in there. You can't.
Of course.
you're selling the property. So it puts you in a really bad spot. On the other end, we also had a lot of landlords that were just leaving their units empty because of concern of tenants taking advantage and not wanting to pay the rent, right? Because they knew they couldn't get evicted. That now makes the vacancy problem that we have now even worse, because you have landlords that might have that basement that they can rent out or that spare unit, right? But they're choosing not to because of the risk in the market when it comes to tenant delinquency. So we're hoping that, having a product like this where you pay 5% of the rent to our rent guarantee program, but we completely take away the risk of tenant default, would really encourage a lot of people to basically, perhaps if that's what's holding you back from renting your property and adding more supply to the market, which we desperately need now, I'm hoping that will encourage some people to really jump in as landlords.
That's a very, very important point. And I can completely see where like I said, I do not rent my basement anymore because of the issues that I've seen. That, of course, is just one unit of supply that could be helping the market. But because I don't want to deal with the risks, I won't. And so I can only imagine that that's happening with other people everywhere across Canada, and that is impacting supply. So that's a very good point.
Absolutely.
Now, I don't know if you can do this, but could you walk me through how you're actually able to provide this type of insurance? Maybe share your experiences of how you've seen it protect any landlords so far.
No, that's a good question. And SingleKey, as you guys know, is a fairly recent new company. We started this business in 2017, have been at it for about 4 years now. But we are still a new business growing rapidly, especially during this time of a high-risk environment. Now, that being said, we don't take on the risk ourselves, right? So, the rent guarantee, we're liable for 12 months of rent payments, damages, legal fees. So it is a lot of risk we have to carry on behalf of the landlords. So to be able to actually support that risk, we are reinsured through the Lloyd's reinsurance market. So we have a large insurance company behind us to back our claims. They are responsible for 100% of the risk on the claims, and we do pay them a monthly premium for every policy that we guarantee. And our job is to basically control the risk or minimize the risk upfront as much as possible. And we do that by, making sure that we have proper screening procedures in place, that we're collecting all the necessary documents like your credit reports and proof of income to make sure that, we can do as much as we can. We can do as much as we can to kind of basically deter any professional tenants or any high risk tenants from getting into the program in that sense. Now, in terms of how it's going so far, we do process a number of delinquencies every month. We do partner with paralegals to help us go through that process as quickly as possible in order to reduce the risk. It does take us about 3 to 4 months to typically, get a delinquent tenant out of the property, and we keep paying you the rent as a landlord for as long as it takes us to get that tenant out and cover all the fees for the paralegals, et cetera. Now, in terms of what that process typically looks like is that's usually our last resort when it comes to starting an eviction. We first try to really play a bit of a mediator role. So, if you call us and say, hey, Viller, tenant hasn't paid the rent, on November 1st, can you help me out? We'll try to get in touch with that tenant, have a conversation, see if there's anything we can do to help. Oftentimes it's as simple as putting together a bit of a payment plan if people are in a bit of a financial bind, just to give them a chance to kind of catch up on the lost rent.
Sure.
And sometimes that works. Other times we have people that are just, they don't want to cooperate and are not responsive, in which case we will then pass the case on to one of our paralegals. And then within 2 weeks, we're able to write a check to the landlord for the lost rent payment for that month. So they can cover their mortgage payments and move on.
Got it.
The worst one so far has been
yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. There's some worst case scenarios?
There's definitely some worst case scenarios. And like I mentioned, typically 3 or 4 months is you're able to kind of write a delinquency, but we've had cases where we've gone a full 12 months without, the landlord has gone 12 months without getting their rent. And this is typically, this happened last year in 2020 during COVID.
Okay.
And some of the eviction bans really slowed us down. So we've had to pay out on 12 months of lost rent. In this particular case, there was also, the tenant also left behind about $8,000 worth of property damage.
Oh.
That we were able to help the landlord with in terms of just cleaning the place and bringing it back to the market. They obviously were very happy that we were there to support during that nightmare scenario. And we got a great testimonial with that particular landlord that's coming out on our website.
Perfect. Yeah, that'd be an interesting case. And I'm sure they were. Now I have to ask, were they a small time landlord? Were they like a single or like a couple property owner or?
Yeah, absolutely. They had about 5 properties that they were managing in a small town in Ontario. And
okay.
There was a bit of a safety concern there. The tenant was a bit, so we did have to get the police involved, and it was a bit of a process.
Yeah. Hopefully those scenarios are not as extreme going forward, or at least there's only a few of them you have to deal with, because I'm sure it's stressful from so many different fronts to deal with that.
Absolutely. For us, it's the numbers, because we deal with thousands of tenant screenings and clients each month. We do see the full gamut of.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Now, I'm going to skip over. I think we kind of went over some of this stuff, but in your opinion, why has the industry taken so long to develop the right tools to reduce the stress put on landlords in these situations? I feel like this is nothing new. So why is it taking so long to help?
Yeah, and I think that's a good question, Nicole. And I think it's related to your question previously in terms of what's happening in the kind of like in the world, in the real estate market in general, right? If you look at our company, we're all about our focus is, and the way that we've taken a different approach is that, instead of providing another property management tool or just another tenant screening tool, we said, hey, what can we do to actually take away that risk of tenant delinquency for the landlord? And unfortunately, that's a risk that's gotten worse and worse over time. It's really developed. And there's a few factors that play into that, right? We've got a rising real estate market. So property prices are going up and mortgage payments are becoming more and more kind of substantial, right?
Sure.
So the need to be able to have a way to cover that is very important. Secondly, we're seeing vacancies drop down dramatically. We're seeing a lot of cities now taking action towards improving that and basically improving affordability, which is becoming a concern, into bringing more rental stock into the market as well. And some of the regulations that are being put forth, that regulatory environment is changing in the favor of the tenants a bit more in many jurisdictions. And that makes sense, but at the same time, it's coming at the cost of the landlord. So as the cost of delinquency goes up for the landlords, the need for what we do becomes more and more important, right? So we're at a point now where, hey, it's just even a one-bedroom condo is going to cost you quite a bit of money to actually buy and cover the mortgage payments. And if that tenant doesn't pay their rent on time each month, it puts you in a really difficult bind to carry that property. So I think, as time goes on, this is something that's likely to get worse, because it doesn't seem to be any change in the direction that the rental market is taking. So as it becomes more difficult for tenants to get a place to live and to afford the house, the city has a responsibility to become, I guess, more tenant favoring in its bylaws. And we'll be there to help landlords, I guess, keep up with that and protect themselves to make sure they make their rent payments each month. I also wanted to mention that we also have, while the rent guarantee is primarily kind of focused towards a smaller landlord, we also have a version of it where we can make it more accessible to the larger property managers and multifamily side, where we can tier the pricing and the coverage to, in order to reduce the cost and make it a bit more efficient for the larger property managers as well. So definitely get in touch with us to learn more about that.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. Nailed it. So I did want to note that SingleKey has over 400 Google reviews and a 4.9 star rating. That's super impressive. Most companies, especially how kind of new you are, to have that many reviews and that high of a rating is pretty impressive. Why do you think the response has been so overwhelmingly positive? Can you share
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and to be frank, we do ask customers for reviews, especially if they have experience with us, and like most businesses do. But I would say the number one reason is that, hey, we're actually solving a real problem. People just, are very happy with the fact that we exist and we're out there to provide and to do what we do. And that reflects in the great customer feedback that we get on a daily basis. That also coupled with some great customer service. And I think that's really been a focus for us in the sense that, you'll see in a lot of the reviews, they will actually name our team members by name.
Oh,
hey,
nice. Yeah.
Great. And solve that or fix that. And we offer, like a lot of kind of like SaaS tools out there where it's just basically, hey, use our tool, but you can't really get in touch with us. You can't call us. No, we take the opposite approach. We do actually want you to get in touch with us and so we can support you. We do offer a kind of like a live chat support on our website during the day. And we also offer 1-800 number to get in touch with us if you're having any trouble. They kind of get you up and running. And, it really goes a long way, I think, for people to come back to us. And it's definitely reflected in the reviews.
Awesome. Yeah. Now, before you go, is there anything you and your team at SingleKey have been working on or working towards that you want to share with the listeners?
Yes, actually, the timing is great for this because we have a brand new product that we're launching in market on Monday next week.
Amazing.
And this will be the first free automated rent collection tool for Canadian landlords out there. right? So we're offering it basically a monthly automated pre-authorized debit rent collection tool where you can just, very easy to use. You can set up your bank account there, sync up your bank account, invite the tenant to do the same, and then just put in to say, hey, look, the rent is $2,000 a month starting on November 1st, and it'll pull it from the tenant's account, deposit into the lender's account on a monthly basis on the first of the month automatically.
Perfect.
And the great thing about that is not only does it save you a bit of time and, no more checks or, checks are almost kind of like offensive now, right?
Yeah.
You can get a checkbook and pay for it and wait for it 2 weeks to show up.
No, yeah. Millennials are not, Gen Zs are not about that. Yeah.
You get an invite link. Hey, your landlord invited you to set up monthly rent collection, and you just basically log in with your bank account. It'll sync up to your bank account and provide permission for the rent to kind of be processed automatically on a monthly basis. And it's also better from, you no longer have to kind of nudge tenants or remind them to send you an e-transfer as well. So it takes that factor away. But the real differentiator here, and this is part of the reason why we're offering it for free, is that now we're working with the credit bureaus to report these payments or rent payments to them as a trade line.
Oh, okay. Nice.
The impact there is that, if you're a student or new to credit or new to Canada person, this is a great way for you to actually build your credit.
Absolutely. Yes.
And it's the biggest expense you have on a monthly basis as a tenant anyway. So it's absurd that you're not able to actually use that as a way to kind of build your credit history.
Yes, right? yes. Absolutely.
There's a bit of a financial inclusivity play here in the sense that, younger people, you can definitely use this to kind of position yourself for, buying, getting into qualifying for a mortgage.
Sure.
And also there's a few religions out there where people don't necessarily like to be in debt, right? So this is another way to actually build that credit history, which is
absolutely.
Now, on the landlord side, they love it because it gives tenants another reason to pay their rent on time, right? So
yes.
Payments. And, this idea came to us as a way we get a lot of calls on a weekly basis to say, oh my God, we had this terrible tenant that we dealt with. Can I report them to you guys so no other landlord has to go through that?
Yeah, of course.
And the answer was no, we can't do that because it's legal. We can't just take your word for it, right? So this is a very transparent way of building something similar where, hey, we're simply basically reporting those rental payments to the credit reporting agency, in a very controlled fashion. And it's black and white, right? Yeah, the rent was either paid on time or it was, paid 30 days late or it was missed. And it's very transparent and compliant in the way that we're doing it.
Awesome.
We're excited about this product. Yeah.
That's great. Well, I want to thank you so much for sharing all your great insight with us today. And just one final question. For those looking, where can people connect with you online or find you online?
Absolutely. Please go to and visit SingleKey.com to learn more about our services and book a call with us to try us out. If you're a larger property manager as well, we have an enterprise solution for you that provides automation through our API and white labeling. So definitely get in touch with me or Sam to help you learn more about that. And send us an email at info@SingleKey.com.
Perfect. Well, until next time, everyone, keep swimming.
You've reached the end of another episode of Sink or Swim. Make sure to visit us at rensync.com/podcast to access show notes, key takeaways, and where you can sign up to our newsletter to receive free bonus content. If you found value in this show, please also remember to rate, review, and subscribe. Don't forget to join us next week for another episode. Thanks for listening.